So where we had left off was the revolutionary press, and that was with this, right? The stamp tax. And the point we had made was that, like, you can have a different narrative about the origins of a free press in America that says it's not just about principle, but it's also about profits, right? Because the news business is a business. It was a business back then. And by the way, I added this slide. So you had the idea of, like, this is how it kind of started out with the individual printer guy. And there's this copy shop, and people would bring in news for this, right? And then they start taxing each piece of paper, and then that pisses people off because of the profits. So then that obviously has a lot to do with the anti-British message and everything else. And then we talked about how this rolled into the Revolutionary War, how the press became a tool. Like, you know, you really, if you weren't on the right side, if the British took over your town and you were a patriot press, you know, you'd probably have your press wrecked and your office burned down, and you'd be tarred and feathered, you know, have boiling tar poured over you, or you'd be lynched in the middle of the streets, and vice versa if you were a Tory press and the Americans won, right, in the town. So it went from just like, hey, I own a coffee shop, just bring in whatever you want and I'll print it. I promise I'll print everything that I get, to that, to then after the war, what they call the partisan press, which was, you know, it was really the Federalists and I called it the Anti-Federalists, but the party was actually called the Republicans, right, which was Jefferson's party. And these two sides became so entrenched that a lot of people today, with the partisan warfare that we have with Fox News and MSNBC, they say this is like the days of the partisan press, where everybody just hated each other and they were at each other's throats. But to pick up on, you know, this idea that was about business, and how business has ended up throughout this kind of whole history shaped the character of the press, and how and why that matters. This idea of the partisan press, right, which is where we left off, which I don't have a slide. I had a slide earlier on about that. But you guys think that was good for business or bad for business? So partisan press, they all kind of look like these guys reading it. And now the press is really nasty. Do you guys think the newspapers were cheap? Were they inexpensive and easy to get? No, they were printed on linen. And was every average person reading them? No, just these clowns, right? So then suddenly you had changes, right? And that's why I have this slide. You suddenly have changes in the printing technology, and now Schudson would warn us not to attribute everything to technology, right? That there's changes in culture too. But you also have much more public education. So you have many more people beginning to read and write. And, you know, you start having these cities beginning to develop more and more, and the people in the cities becoming readers. So by the time this press comes out in 1830, and I'm sorry, you know, my apologies to Schudson, but I just got to attribute some of this to technology, right? This is a steam-powered press. It is now printing much cheaper paper. It's a penny a newspaper, right? And now there's a literate population, at least in the cities, that can read them. So how many of you guys think that might have to do with, I mean, you could argue, well, the society was changing anyway, but at least all these changes, were reflected in the nature of the news, right? So before, in this era, when this was the press, and these were the guys reading it, the press was really expensive and printed for the business community, and a lot of the like nasty political arguments that were going on were not appealing to the general public. Kind of in the way that, you know, I think a lot of my students get turned off to the news now because it just seems like a bunch of Democrats and Republicans screaming at each other, right? So I think that it was bad for business in that time too. When they invent this thing, all of a sudden there's a chance to open up the market and change really what we mean by news. this is when the axe murder of the prostitute happens, okay, in the 1830s. So there's this call girl named Helen Jewett, and she's chopped into pieces with an axe, and her room is kind of set on fire. And there's this guy, James Gordon Bennett, and he sees he's one of these type of people, right? He's got his own print shop, but now instead of this thing, he's got himself one of these, and he sees a business opportunity, right? So what does he do? He leaves the office. Can you believe it? He actually gets up, no COVID-19 at that time, I guess. He gets up and he goes down to the brothel. So why is that different or strange than what was going on in this era and with these guys? Someone's got to read Noe's text because I don't have my text thing up.
Because he actively sought out news?
Yes. So he's a reporter, right? He's acting as a reporter. So I'm going to make the argument, based on limited evidence, that there is a connection between profit and enterprise that is driving people now to develop the profession of reporting. So this begins to happen. It doesn't begin to happen because of some dream of democracy or freedom. Why does it happen? I bet
Money,
yeah. Right? So interesting, right? So not every influence of profit is negative on the evolution of the press. But if the money is that important to shaping the character of the press, then you get the bad and the ugly along with the good, right? So they're always intertwined like that. And so it used to cost 6 cents, which was, you can imagine how costly that was, right? Having to shell out 6 cents for a whole paper. I mean, God, you'd be broke at that rate, right? So not really, but things were a little cheaper in 1830, right, than they are today. 6 cents went a lot farther in 1830 than it does today, right? So that was expensive, and now the penny press. How much was the penny? How much could you buy a paper for with the new penny papers? A penny, right? So there you go. So it's a lot cheaper, and then you start having all these stories like the Helen Jewett story. So how many of you guys have done the reading yet about Helen Jewett, and what immediately began to emerge with the Helen Jewett story? Someone's got to read Noe. Luna, you seem to be the Noe whisperer, so you're going
to... humanizing the victim.
Yeah, so what were people, why were people driven to this story? Because they just like what do you think?
I don't know what Noe's typing, but I'm going to bring in some personal input, because I think it was that she was an orphan.
Was she?
Was she?
Do we know that? Do we know anything about Helen Jewett?
No.
No, we don't know.
What versions of Helen Jewett do we get? More than that, Snowy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Pretty much every paper has its own Helen Jewett. Right? But what fascinated these people? What drove them to the story, do you think?
Her life as a prostitute.
Yeah, so I mean, if you were, I don't know, let's say you were some working class guy living up, several blocks away from us, like reasonably far away in a different neighborhood than this, right? Do you necessarily know what goes on with prostitutes? Or if you're some woman who's
Not really.
married, but they're all prostitutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't know who these people are. And you don't know why they become prostitutes, right? So this crime story becomes an opportunity for the society to start to talk about, why are there prostitutes? What is prostitution, right? What about, I mean, there's an obvious, what is the obvious on a cynical level, just so we can get this out of the way, what's the obvious attraction?
That it's a woman prostitute that got murdered.
Yeah.
And it's
What
taboo.
comes to mind when
The
you
taboo that brought it also. Yeah,
What?
like Noe said, the taboo.
The taboo? Is she really good looking? Right? Is she really beautiful? Do we get any good art, right? With the beautiful body, with the head chopped off or something, you know what I mean? Just like the modern horror movies, right? Where you have the, beautiful young woman who's being chased and hacked up or whatever. I don't know why. Sex and death, right? We seem to have so that's in the mix, right? It's an incredibly, on a visceral level, it's going to fascinate us right there, right? And does James Gordon Bennett do a lot with that? So what are some of the ways that specific aspects of the Helen Jewett story end up becoming even saucier for what they want to do? What do we find out about Helen Jewett and the way she conducted her business that make this an even better story? Does anyone remember from the reading? Do you guys remember how she has such a lucrative business, how she does so well in business with this? She's got all these, she writes to all these men, right? She's got an Instagram account and she's got all these guys on her Insta, right? She's really good at it. She's really good at those posts, right? She's like an influencer, right? So James Gordon Bennett finds this, finds her hard drive, basically, finds her phone, right? And he's like, check it out. Check out all these. She's really good. Check out all of her posts. This woman's brilliant, right? So that kind of adds to it too, and that adds to the intrigue. What about the murderer? What do we know about the murderer?
It was brutal.
Yeah, it was brutal. But who's the suspect?
And it was done by a nice guy.
Nice guy, yeah. It's not some guy dragging an axe with a limp or whatever, right? And a twisted face, like a literal ogre with a hunchback. So if people are thinking, what is a prostitute? What else are they thinking? What does an axe murderer look like, right? What does a psychopath look like? Does he look like a good-looking young 19-year-old clerk? Is that possible? Does he not look like a fiend? He's called a fiend. He chopped up a woman with an axe. So do you guys get where I'm going with this? We think about, remember when we were talking before about tabloid news and about trashy news? Would you guys call this legit news, serious news, or is this sensational news? Luke, you got to turn on your audio.
I didn't want to be wrong, though.
How can you be wrong? What's the right answer? Do I seem to have all this, all the right answers? Is that the deal? Is that the game I'm playing here?
I think you're the guy that finds questions within the answers.
Yeah. Usually you have a rhetorical voice.
Yeah. Well, what questions do you guys have? Am I asking the right questions? Let me ask you this. This was my concern about all this, though, is I've been teaching this for a while. Is what I'm teaching, does it matter anymore? If we're at a point in time, are you guys getting something valuable out of this? If it's true what I'm saying, if it's true what John Meacham is saying, that we are now the Enlightenment itself is on trial, and the Enlightenment itself might be found guilty and may fall apart in 2 months. Is me digging into the details of the murder of Helen Jewett a worthy discussion of ours right now? Do you guys get something out of this that's helpful to you in the world we live in now?
Well, people are so lazy and they're so, I don't know what else I can say about it, but people don't want to think for themselves. Like, they want to look to somebody to follow. They want, like, somebody to, like, build their thoughts off of, to, like, agree with their, like, beliefs. Like, nowadays, like, people, if, like, they're not looking at a model, like, half the time they won't even have, like, their own, like, view, like, their own, like, personal views on, like, something. Like, people are always going based off what someone else is saying. So, like, for Trump, like, if he's always talking and all these people are listening to him, they're gonna listen. Like, if you tell them you found true, accurate news that, like, totally, like, contradicts what he said, they don't care, because, like, they're listening to him, they're devoted to him, like, they're just, like, I don't know.
But am I doing what I'm concerned about is am I helping you guys out by getting into this conversation? As you hear me talk about this, does this resonate, and do you feel this is going to help you understand news and media in the world now? This story of 1830s and the murder of the prostitute and things like that?
I think it's definitely, like, giving us more insight. It's making us give us some, like it helps us build off of, like, your questions and help us, like, find a way to mold them into critical thinking questions. So it just kind of makes us, so we're learning about how it was back then, so that way we can try to see if we can reapply them back into the modern world, to see if we can kind of, like, just put together back the way news was, where it was more, like, factual, in a sense that, like, it was never just going off of someone's word, where it was more of a cult following, but it was just rather people thinking for themselves and making them do what essentially you're doing right now, is that you're kind of giving us, like, in a sense, like, quote unquote rhetorical questions, but that allows us to think more rather than just kind of just, like, sit there and nod. So
Right. You realize there are all these things going on in the media. There's all these different dynamics happening at once. I mean, I would almost be remiss. It's like I try not to throw everything in at once, but it's hard not to when we just start talking and I just start downloading, the things that I've studied as we talk about all this. But one of the things I'll have you guys read that I also published in American Journalism is I wrote a history of fake news. And the other major story of, like, say, 1835, the other major story of this era was the moon hoax. And what that was Noe's looking like she does something. Are you familiar with the moon hoax, Noe? Ever heard of that? So I love her. We're playing, like, what's that game, pantomime or whatever.
staging the moon landing.
That's different. That's 1969, not 1835. So yeah, but but that was also another major media event. You're right on there. But that comes with the invention of TV, and the Apollos, whatever. But what happens in 1835 is same within a year or so. It's actually just, I don't know, probably going on at the same exact time in New York City as the murder of Helen Jewett. This story comes out that, I don't know if you guys ever knew this, but this scientist in New Zealand had managed to develop a new lens for a telescope in, like, 1835. And the latest scientific reports had just come out. Like, they managed to get copies of this scientist's journal and printed every day in, like, the New York Sun. I think it was the New York Sun, right? And so he was able to see the moon. And what he was able to see on the moon you had to go buy the next paper to find out then what he was able to see on the moon. You know, we find out a little bit about the development of the lens. Is it like there were all these structures on the moon? And then it turns out there's all these bat people that live on the moon with like wings, and there's these palaces made of crystals and jewels. And these bat people are having a lot of sexual activity, actually. These bat people are frolicking, and it's very risque what's going on with the things on the moon there. And you can imagine what a huge seller this was in the New York newspapers, and how envious the other papers were of the people that had the scoop about the guys with the telescope and the moon people with bat wings and the bat people and the sex that they were all having in these palaces of jewels. And in fact, a group of scientists came down from Yale to go look at these scientific studies. And the people at the newspaper offices sent them across town, sent them all over town, really, going to look for this scientific journal, you know, for the original copies of it. And this went on for weeks, and it made quite a lot of money. Now, does anyone see a connection between that and 2020? So that was also in the penny press right at the same time as the Helen Jewett murder. How many of you guys knew that there were bat people living on the moon, and that they have a lot of really pretty crazy behaviors?
I didn't know that was a thing, and now just looking back on it, that's the stupidest shit I've ever heard.
You think you would have believed it though if it was the
No, because
the first few newspapers that were about the development of the technology of the lens for the telescope, and how the moon was starting to come into focus, because I mean it was like really.
I just want to know how you get that from looking at the moon and then you see all those little craters that it has. Like, where do you see bat people in all those craters?
Well, I mean, I think that they had trouble getting a lot of illustrations into the newspapers of the 1830s, but
Of course they did.
How did they know that they was having sex?
Yeah. How did you see that? How did you
Right.
see that?
so,
Well, yeah, that's always the first thing you find when you look up moon hoax.
great moon hoax.
Or try typing bat people moon hoax.
Well, this is it. So there you go. There they are.
What the fuck is that?
That's what was happening on the moon.
No. Come on now. Come on, America.
It wasn't just America. This became a top seller around the world. This became the #1 newspaper.
Were those trees also? Were those trees?
Oh yeah, there was
Palm trees. What the fuck?
of crystals. You know? Yeah, look at them all. See the palaces?
And they have deer. There's deer on the moon.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is all loosely based on real events, as they say in the movies. Yeah.
Real.
So wait, here, great moon hoax.
See, stuff like that is just what makes me have no hope for humanity.
If I was just a foreign alien species and I heard about the shit y'all were making up, I just would have dipped. It wouldn't be worth anything to come here.
I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. I would have bought the paper. Look at them. Look at all them. I like this guy though. He's pretty cool. Anyway, so that happens. Maybe that has a more direct relevance, right, to today. And I don't know. Should I pick up on this history next time? I feel like we've been here a while. You guys are great, but then is where we go from here. So I guess the other thing to point out, maybe if we were talking about all the ways that the Helen Jewett story affected things, was, there had never been any real trial coverage before this, right? So it raised all these questions of like how much information you put into the paper before there's a trial. James Gordon Bennett, didn't he do things to kind of spice up the story, like suggesting maybe Robinson was innocent, because then that would raise questions about who really did it and everything. And then what's crazy is they got all the letters between Robinson and Jewett, and they were both really great writers. Like Helen Jewett kind of met her match. Like she met another Instagram influencer in Robinson, right? And they kind of had this passionate love affair, and I don't know, it kind of all went wrong with an axe and all that kind of thing. But and then of course he was found innocent. It was like the OJ trial of the 1830s, because he got off, even though he pretty clearly was guilty, because it was an all-male jury, and a lot of the jury was other young clerks like him, and so it became like the women versus the men in the courtroom, and the men just let the other guy go, kind of thing. And Millie's pissed off. Yeah, she's disgusted. Yeah, pretty terrible. And then he was parading around this like murderer gone free, kind of being a braggart and a jerk. Yeah, pretty crazy story. So, okay, I mean, then, where this goes from here is, so Noe, how did you do with the His Girl Friday movie?
It was good.
Do you have your presentation up?
Okay, I do! Exclamation mark. She's excited. She's really ready to show this.
So that's on Padlet. Should we talk about it now, or should we hold off until next Tuesday with it?
I mean, if you guys have time, it's pretty short.
Well, it depends on how you guys want to just pick up and have the discussion about His Girl Friday next Tuesday, or you guys all want to talk about it now?
Well, I mean,
maybe do a vote. Let's do a vote.
No. I might dip and I might have to leave in like 20 minutes, so I think it'd probably be best, but to carry this next week, so that way we have more time, because I think we got kind of sidetracked with like the moon people. So.
Right. So, all right, Vincent, are you going to be able to? Who's going to be able to join us on Tuesday? Ethan, how you doing? You've been quiet all class.
I try to join you guys on lunch break.
Wait, what'd you say? You'll be able to join us Tuesday, Vincent?
Yeah, I try to come in on my lunch break at 2. Yeah.
Okay. Ethan, what were you going to say?
No, I've just been busy, so I've just been doing work.
Were you able to follow along, or you've been kind of dividing your attention today?
No. Today I was paying attention. I thought you were asking in general, how was I doing?
Yeah, no, I mean, how about with today? How was, any thoughts about all that we covered?
Not really, no.
No?
Not today.
You find this kind of stuff, this media history, is interesting, or do you find the more contemporary stuff more interesting, or,
Well, I mean, I do find it interesting, and I think it's also important. It's just not as interesting to me as contemporary, but not saying, I'm not trying to say anything out of that. I was listening today. I don't know, I'm just not that talkative today.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think, that's why I kind of brought this discussion up, is that a lot of history screams out to me at certain times, like now. Other times, when I'm talking about the murder of Helen Jewett right now and our entire society seems like it's in meltdown, I wonder about its relevance, so I guess it just is the way it is. But hopefully, I mean, this story about the murder brings up certain things that, certain insights that help us understand the media in general better, and like where we came from and where we are now and maybe where we're going. Do you guys see any parallels to any of what we talked about with the penny press to today? How about you, Mackenzie? You look like you're about to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say that I see a lot of parallels in the readings that we do. Just like I'm definitely able to compare them to contemporary society.
Do you feel like it gives you a better understanding of what's going on now?
Definitely. I think knowing the history of things is important when knowing the current situation. So, yeah.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, so here's what I'm going to recommend. You guys know what the next movie is that we're all supposed to watch together on the roster?
Is it The President's Men?
Is it? Are we already there?
I don't know.
Well, by the way, so I am going to start, I wasn't able to get to it yet, but I am going to start posting a lot of stuff. I'm going to create a tab on La Lima for it. And I mean, I thought, actually, I'm going to post it into, hold on. Let me paste it in here. I listened to this interview with Bob Woodward that I thought was pretty fascinating in terms of this class. That was aired, I think this morning or yesterday. I don't know. One day is kind of blurring into the next for me, but I'm going to put in the chat the link to it, and I will put it up on La Lima. Let me see what the movie is, because what I was going to say is the movie that relates most directly to where we would pick up on the history of news or newspapers next week would be Citizen Kane, okay, which a lot of people list as the best movie ever made. I mean, it's an old movie. Obviously, it's from the 40s, so you may totally disagree with that. But whether or not it was about newspapers, a lot of people say, it was the most groundbreaking film that was ever made for a variety of reasons. I don't know if you guys will agree with that when you see it, but let me just see what our movie is, where we're on the schedule. But I would urge you in any case to watch it, because it would give you a picture because where we're going next with the newspaper history is the 1890s, circa 1900, and maybe then we'll talk a little bit about newspapers today, but then I think we'll leave it at that. Let me look at our roster. So I'm a little bit late in posting this upcoming week's assignments, but it's a lighter one this week than it's been in the past, so there's that. That's good. Let's see. The movie for this week. So a bunch of you guys said you're going to do your presentation on, so Luke, and we haven't seen Cody in a while, but Cody said he's going to do it on Citizen Kane. So yeah, we don't have another one due actually until October 1st. Looks like.
When is the one for Citizen Kane due? Like my presentation? Like what day?
Well, it's supposed to be, in theory, it's supposed to be due today, Luke, but just get it up there when you can. It would be good if you could get it up there soon, so that for the purpose of, if people don't want to watch the movie, but they want to look at your presentation, or you know what? Do you want to do your presentation on Tuesday? You want to share some slides about it?
Sure, if you want.
What you can do is, if you ask me, I think you need recording permission from the host when you get on Zoom. But if you record it, then you can do a recording of your presentation and get the homework done at the same time. So Noe, that could work for you too. If you want to do that. But yours is already up, right? So it's up to you, Luke, if you want to do it that way.
Wait, like record? I don't get what you mean. Record myself and then like.
So like what I've been doing with the Zoom lectures, where you put up your slides, you share them with us, and you do a Zoom lecture. You like a 5-minute talk or whatever about Citizen Kane, and we record it, and then you download that recording, or Zoom will automatically download it for you, and then you upload it. Do you have a YouTube channel? So it's easy to create one. So you just create a YouTube channel. Do you have a Gmail account separate from the university? So, I mean, you can create, the university has Gmail, but you have to get a permission to create a YouTube channel with your university Gmail account. But you can use your personal one in like 1 second if you already have a Gmail account, create a YouTube account, and then you just drag the video that Zoom recorded for you into YouTube. It'll take an hour or two to upload it, and then you grab the link, and that's your presentation. So you can do that. I guess what we'll be doing next week is like where we get into more of the practical, less the historical broad discussion, and more into like, you know, of all the different kinds of information that you encounter out there, like especially on the internet, what's news versus what's propaganda versus what's advertising versus what's, you know, raw footage of somebody putting up a cell phone video versus, you know, all the different, what we call the information neighborhoods. And so this week is about information. And rather than these readings, I'll share these news literacy websites, and you go on there and you watch the thing and you fill out a quiz. And it's simpler. It's less complicated than trying to follow my damn crazy line of thinking. But, you know, and you'll get something practical out of it, and probably, hopefully be less work for you all. What you're going to get is you're going to log into a news literacy website with your email address, and your first name is going to be the password. And that's what you'll use for one of the assignments. And then the other one is, any guys ever heard of Coursera? It's like a online learning thing that existed before the pandemic. So the other is a Coursera site. You can watch these videos on the site for free, and then I have a quiz that I'll put up on Lalima about all this. So, okay, any questions? Any new thoughts about how I should be running Zoom? Is this working out, you guys think? You know, I mean, I thought about just coming straight in here, putting up the PowerPoint 2 minutes in and going with that. But I just feel like whenever I teach this class, I feel like there's so much going on in the world that the discussion should reflect what's happening out there. So, you know, I think it's worth it. So I just hope you guys are, you know, if you look on the syllabus, there is a method to the madness here, folks. We are kind of going theme by theme, you know, sort of progressing towards November and December. Okay, so if you look at the course plan that's on the syllabus, you'll sort of see how we're moving through all that. Okay. All right. I will see you guys Tuesday. Stay tuned for Lalima Week 4. We'll be up there shortly, and also grades. Some of you guys, I don't know how things are shaking out with the grades so far, but if you want to retake something or catch up on something, let's talk about it through email. We'll figure it out. Okay. All right. Talk to y'all soon.
Bye, Dr. G.
Bye.